Welcome everybody to episode number 315 of Goulet Q&A, where fountain pens are still a thing. I am Brian Goulet of the Goulet Pens fame, and here we are in my office in the Goulet Pens global headquarters doing another Q&A. Yes, we really have done 315 of these things over the years, and today I'm going to be talking about the LAMY imporiums and why I haven't done a video about them. That ends today. Talking about Pilot Varsity ink. What ink is in there anyway? The most popular nib size in the world, but nib grind size this time instead of actual nib size. It's a follow-up from last week. And I'm going to do a somewhat deep dive into different pen materials like resin versus plastic versus acrylic versus precious resin. What is up with all this? We're going to get all into it today. So it should be a good time. So yeah, stick around because, well, right now we have feedback. All right. Some good feedback on this last Q&A. I enjoyed taking a look at it, especially all the nested comments y'all are doing and talking to each other and stuff. I just love that. I love that. Good feedback. Got some good ink suggestions for watching ink dry. That was surprisingly popular, so I might have to experiment with that. Maybe do some like video shorts or something like that, or maybe do a whole theme of, I don't know, ink showdowns or something on inks that are fun to watch dry, or maybe inks that change a lot when they dry. I don't know. We'll have to figure out how to make that happen, but I've been enjoying it, so thank you for leaving all the comments. Let's see here. We got some feedback from Nick BR57. Says, can you read data on an 8-inch floppy disk from the 80s? What makes you think people in the future will be able to access what we store in current technologies, even if it doesn't degrade over time or platforms shut down and the data they hold is lost? So this is a follow-up to talking about writing things down for archivability and historical reference. It's a good point. We have a lot of digital storage right now, but even just in my lifespan, as I've observed, because my parents had a business in the house growing up. It was like a digital, what do you call it? Like a pre-production for like printing. So pre-press, digital stuff, digital things. So I was like in Photoshop and Quark Express and FileMaker and stuff like that at like 9, 10 years old. But anyway, so yes, I watched them go from like zip drives to, floppy disks to you name it. And then of course, getting into like different types of hard drives and now cloud storage and all that. Yeah, it's like all the different file formats and things, VHS to DVD to Blu-ray to who knows what. Yeah, it's a good point. So even digital technology, it's got to continually be upgraded. In fact, it's kind of interesting. This is a tangent. I just remembered this, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not super knowledgeable about this, so fact check me, but I believe that these days when they record movies, like full feature-length movies, it requires so much hard drive space that I believe like they have, just server racks filled with hard drives to, house all the data for these things. I believe in order to like archive them, they pretty much just roll these servers into like a vault and just set them aside for future, whatever. If they need archivability or need to get things, they're literally just like cold storing entire racks of hard drives. And I'm like, what file format are those going to be in? Is that going to be referenceable in the future? I don't know. Lots changing. So good conversation coming off of that. Fox the Aviatrix says, I have used every nib from the Platinum Coarse Nib and Sailor Zoom to Pilot Extra Fine on onion skin paper, because I talked about that last week, and they all work. Brian mentioned what type of ink to use, and I agree. It definitely depends more on the ink when you use onion skin paper. So that's good to know, because I was speculating a little bit. So I'm glad I wasn't way off the mark. So Vox says, I wouldn't put Tomoe River in the onion skin category. It's way too thick. Oh my gosh, that is some really thin paper. Yamamoto Champion and Typewriter are closer to the onion skin thinness. Okay, that's really good. And then Airlight or Airmail, Airlight, something like that was mentioned. I'm not the most knowledgeable on onion skin, but that is good to know. So thank you for that feedback. And then it was also noted like the PO, I forget, I didn't write this one down, but the Pilot PO nib is a postable nib. I believe it was meant, it's a really, really fine nib, I think to assist in writing on very thin airmail paper. So originally. That's not what most people are using it for these days, but still, that's kind of interesting. Okay, Marianne Hummel says, I love how unscripted these videos are. I don't have any water. Where are the test papers? How do you spell omniscient? Love the casual yet informative vibe. Well, I'm glad you like that vibe because that vibe's happening no matter what. I do prepare for these. Like, it takes me several hours to prepare every Q&A, but mostly it's like trying to do some research, putting my, at least like bullet out my thoughts into some kind of, semblance of organization. But yeah, there's no way I could like script out an hour-long thing. That would take, a really long time. So yeah, you're gonna get what you get. But plus, I just love to riff anyway. Even if I script something out, it's very difficult for me to stick my own script. Anyway, Ann Wagner 5779 says, "Thank you, Brian, for considering a video of inks changing color as they dry. Maybe the time lapse would make it possible. It will be interesting to see what inks people suggest." And I did get a lot of good suggestions. "As I'm watching this video, I'm following your thoughtful and professionally informed advice on packing bottles of ink for my move from Arkansas to Maine." So this is a throwback feedback from a long time ago, at this point, several months, I think. "It's a very meditative process, putting each bottle in bubble wrap in a quart-sized plastic bag. I have only 28 bottles, so it won't take forever." Well, that is really cool. You are taking advice that we talked about here as you're packing up for your move, and you're watching as you do it. It's so meta. I'm really glad to hear that there's some practical application to you watching these videos, because I do wonder sometimes, like, is this just pure entertainment or you're actually learning something? So I'm really glad to hear that you're actually putting it to good use. And then last one I have is from Hedranus Celestis. I probably said that wrong, but anyway, there's a company which still produces quality parchment. So I talked about archivability of, various things, what type of paper to use. Talked about parchment or, maybe like animal skin being a good way. So anyway, you talked about parchment. Pergamena parchment. It's not cheap, of course, but if you want a document to stand the test of time, then it's the only way. Okay, that is good to know. So you could go check that out. I've never heard of Pergamena parchment, but no, you can go do your own homework on that if you're interested. And then also said, I did a bit of digging and found that the number 6 is the most widespread nib and feed size. Well, it wouldn't totally shock me, but, I talked about that last week. I kind of pontificated as to which might be the most popular nib size, and then I had a very inconclusive answer. So I don't know what research that you found. Maybe your research was better than mine. So I don't know. Take that as a data point for your information. Got one person who thinks that it's a number 6. That wouldn't totally shock me, but again, I have no hard data, so I don't know. All right, let's talk about some new stuff. Okay, we got a shark attack happening right now. Jinhao shark specifically. This is Jinhao number 5 nib shark pens. So we have this in 3 colors. So we've had the extra fine hooded nibs, which are cool, but not like to everybody's liking. So we got some kind of conventional number 5 size nibs, same pen, same fun, shark themed cap. We have it in 3 colors, the matte green transparent and matte blue. I believe you can eyedropper convert these things too, which would be really cool for the clear one. But anyway, so it's a non-hooded medium nib. I believe you could probably take this number 5 out and put it on another pen that has a number 5. If you want a medium nib, this would be the cheapest way to get it. It's only $5 for this pen, so not a bad deal. It's got a standard international cartridge converter. It does come with the converter too. Again, not bad. So you can go check those out. We have plenty of those. You can check them out right now because we have them for sale. And then we have the Monteverde Innova Fiberglass Emerald. So this is a Goulet exclusive, a special edition. Basically, it's like a carbon fiber weave material, except it's not carbon fiber. Carbon fiber is only black because carbon is black. But it's a fiberglass, so it's like a fiber material. It's basically meant to look exactly like a colored carbon fiber, if you will. So it's kind of cool. It's a nice emerald green color, and we have it right now, $52. Goulet exclusive. It's got a number 6 Yovo nib on there, in extra fine, medium, broad, 1.1 stub, and OmniFlex. Takes standard international cartridge and converter, and it's pretty cool. So you should go check it out. And then, last but not least, we have the Scribo Riveder Listel. This is a Dante's Inferno themed pen. So they've done several pens like this. This is a limited edition, only 219 pieces, but it's inspired by the final verse of Dante's Inferno, when darkness gives way to light. So it's like a nice dark blue, kind of like a night sky color with some like white kind of coming through. Scribo makes beautiful pens. These all come straight out of Italy, and they have some really nice nibs too. So this is like a spiritual successor to the old Omos. And they have flexible nibs, 14K flexibles and extra fine and fine, as well as 18 karat mediums and broads. So you can go check those out. They are standard international cartridge converter as well. All right, I don't have a lot to update on the company side of things, so let's just skip right into the questions, shall we? No punches today. We're just getting right into it. I don't know if that made any sense. No punches. We're not pulling any punches. Maybe that's what I meant to say. No punches. I don't know. I'm not going to punch you for what that's worth. Okay. I went 4 questions this week. I'm a little short on time as I'm recording this. So I'm skipping the spotlight and we're doing 4 questions, but I got a deep dive one. So you might still get your money's worth on this one, which is funny because you're not paying anything to watch this. So I guess you get what you pay for, right? Oh, gosh. Okay. Johnny recorded, asked the question, why don't you have any video about the LAMY imporium? Well, I know I've talked about the imporium before. I've definitely never done a dedicated video that I can remember on the LAMY imporium. And I guess I'm still not going to do that, but I can talk about the LAMY imporium right now. So that's what I'm going to do. So I took your question to heart, and that's what we're going to do, is we're going to talk about the imporium once I get my situation correct here. Okay, let's talk about the imporium. So we don't talk about it a lot because we don't carry it anymore. We try to carry as much as we can, you know, from all of our suppliers, especially like the major ones like Pilot and LAMY and all them. But sometimes it's just not as feasible, or sometimes y'all are just not interested at all in these pens. And that's kind of the case with the imporium. So this imporium that I have here, this like bronze one, this is the OG back in the day, which is really cool because it had this like mostly wrapped nib, which looks pretty awesome. LAMY doesn't do this anymore. This is from the 90s, I believe. I don't remember how I acquired this, but I did at some point, and now I have it. This always reminds me of like the Michelin Man, this grip here, because it's like, you know, very whatever. Okay, so yeah, it's this nib is kind of interesting. It doesn't write that different, but it just looks really cool. So I'm glad I have it in my collection, but they didn't have it for a number of years, and then they brought it back. But when they brought it back, they did what makes total sense, and they put the conventional 14 karat nib on it. So the rest of the pen, though, the design is pretty true to form. Like, they didn't change a whole lot. I guess this one had like a little dot on it or something. So so on the original, I guess they had something with the clip. Yeah, here you go. Okay, that's what it was. So the clip here, you like push it up like this. So it's pretty cool, like engineering-wise. So it kind of stays out of the way. You push it up when you want to clip it onto your whatever, shirt pocket or something. And then, yeah, that's how it kind of rests there. Kind of tucks away. That's kind of neat engineering, right? So the new ones now, it just sits a tiny bit proud, and it's just a spring clip. So I don't know. Does that make any difference to you? Probably not. I imagine it's probably more economical to produce this one, or more practical or whatever. But anyway, that is a change that happened. And then, of course, it makes sense that they would put the 14 karat nibs that they have regularly available on these pens, which is cool because the black one looks really tight with that black nib. I love the black and the gold nib on here. So this is a 14 karat nib, but it's just coated in black. You know, that is a thing that happens. And the rest of the pen is pretty similar. It's a cartridge converter pen. There you go. It's got their LAMY Z27 in there. Takes a cartridge as well. It's a good pen. Like, it's not uncomfortable. It's definitely dense. Like, it's metal. It feels heavy. You know, it's not, I don't know if it's aluminum parts on here, but the barrel itself is fairly heavy. So I would imagine it's probably made of brass, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So it sits nicely in my hand. Let me see if I post it. It does kind of like clip onto the back a little bit. It feels a little weighty when I have the cap on there, I must say. So I would not really write with this thing capped or posted like that, but it's long enough to where you don't have to do that. So it's a decent pen. If you don't like texture on your grip, you're not going to like this very much because you do feel the texture. Now, it's rounded. It's not sharp at all, but the feeling of the texture is pretty unignorable. Plus, it just kind of slopes down like that. So it doesn't really have a good stop. Like if your fingers want to kind of naturally go down, which, the grip on there does help keep it from doing that. But if you're one who tends to kind of like move up on your pen, you need, like a flared end to keep you from getting your fingers around the nib. This one is not really going to do that for you. It's just going to let you fall off into oblivion there and get your fingers all inky if you are not careful. Honestly, I don't have a lot of feedback about this pen from customers that have used it because no one really bought it when we carried it. They're decent looking pens, but the problem is the MSRP on these is $549, which is a lot, especially because the nib that you're getting is the same as what you can get on like the LAMY Studio Palladium or Piano Red, which is less than half the price. So, they're nice pens. Like if anybody that really likes them, I wouldn't say don't get it, but most people have just said that to themselves. So again, I have nothing wrong with the pen at all. It's just, the design is a little interesting. It's a little unconventional. Not everybody is into all the bumps, right? It's a very bumpy pen. And so, yeah, for that reason, it wasn't very popular. And we also had some like stock issues, I believe, because again, they're not huge sellers, so I don't think LAMY produces a ton of them. So therefore, keeping them well stocked was kind of an issue too. So we had sort of this like chicken and the egg kind of thing. It's like, well, if they're not super in demand, then we're not going to stock a ton of them. If we don't have them in stock, people won't buy them. And it just kind of became a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess. But we've not had people banging on our doors asking for them either. So they still sell them. Other people carry them. We just don't. If you're super interested, let me know. And if everybody's pounding down our doors to get LAMY Emporiums, we can always pick it back up. So that is certainly an option. But now I've officially made a video on the LAMY Emporium, and you know what is going on. So hopefully that answers your questions. And that's all I have to say about that, to quote Forrest Gump. All right, next question. This is from Mumalog. Happy Friday, Brian. I have a question on Pilot Varsities. Do you happen to know the specific ink with which they are preloaded? I assume it's a Pilot ink, but not sure if the blue or the black or the blue are standard Pilot black and blue colors. The reason I ask is that my husband holds them in high esteem, but feels that they write better than the Pilot Prera in the same nib size, medium. So I feel the main variable is the ink. I would love to find him a non-disposable pen that gives him the same writing experience. So any suggestions would be much appreciated. That's really interesting that he prefers the Pilot Varsity experience. Now, I will say it is a medium nib, but it's a very round medium nib. I'm a big fan of the Varsity. I think it is such an underrated pen. I think it's a fantastic pen. I highly recommend it to everybody. My mother-in-law, after not wanting to deal with cleaning and maintaining any other type of pen, loves her Varsities. So I always keep her well stocked, get her a nice little mixed pack of them for Christmas every year or whenever she needs them restocked. And it works out great. And they are great writing pens. You would not think for the price that they are, that they would write as well. Now, the nibs themselves, they don't look anything fancy. They're pretty straightforward. It's medium nib only, but it's a very forgiving medium nib. It's a very nicely rounded medium nib. It's a pretty broad medium nib. So I think it writes really well. As far as how it writes compared to the Varsity, I mean, maybe that's a matter of personal preference. The ink choice could be part of it. I think maybe it's partly because like just the nib is rounded so smooth on the Varsity, because the last thing they want is to have to deal with a scratchy nib. And they're not really worried so much about, like baby's bottom and like these types of things, because they can make the ink kind of gush out of these things. So yeah, one alternative, we'll get into the ink in just a second, but one alternative is you can actually refill these Varsities if you're determined enough. I have a video on how to do it where you can actually disassemble the thing. That might be more trouble than it's worth for some people, but it can be done. But what I've also seen too is somebody adapt like an ink syringe with some like tubing, like some plastic tubing. They basically put the tubing like over the syringe end and then over just right over the end of the pen and kind of like inject ink back into the pen. I haven't actually tried that technique myself, but I've seen it done. That's kind of interesting. So if you're determined enough, you can refill these things. Otherwise, you can always just keep buying. You can always just keep buying Varsities. That is an option as well. As far as the ink goes, I did not look at your question in enough time to be able to ask Pilot and get an official answer back. I will see if I can follow up and do that, but I don't imagine probably that it's the exact same ink. And I wanted to test it, so I did. So what I have here is I have some Pilot Varsity Blue. I took a Pilot Varsity Blue and I wrote it out. I did a little scribble. I did some dry time testing, just, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. It dries pretty fast. It dries like not long after 10 seconds. I would say probably 15 seconds. And then I did a little water test as well. I just, this is on Rhodia paper. I just did a grid and then I left some water droplets on there for a couple of minutes. So it was sitting on there for a while. And then I did the same thing. I took some Pilot Blue. I call it Pilot Namiki Blue because it's the exact same ink that you get in the Namiki Blue. But this Pilot Blue is only what comes in the custom 823 and custom 743. They don't sell this bottle individually in the US. But that flatter kind of Namiki bottle, it's the same ink. So I used that. I did it in a glass pen because I just wanted fewer pens to clean out. I started out with this old, no longer available Urbon glass pen. I don't know why I use this thing on video because you guys can't get it anymore. But I like this specific pen because each glass pen is a little bit different. This one writes quite fine, so I like it for that reason. It's going to break my heart one day when it's glass, and if it ever gets damaged or anything, that'll be a sad day for Brian. But anyway, so I wrote with that one. As I was writing it out, though, I realized it was actually a bit finer than the Varsity. So I then wrote with my Rohrer and Klingner, which is an absolute gusher, just to see what difference the ink volume made. So to break it down and show you what it looks like here, it's not that different, but it is slightly different. In terms of the color, the Varsity Blue seems to be just a little bit darker. Just a little bit darker. Maybe a bit of a hint of purple to it. Whereas the Pilot Namiki Blue is slightly lighter with less purple in it. How do I describe that? Dry time, I probably would need to do a more comparable nib size. The dry time was faster for sure on the Pilot Namiki Blue, but I think that's because the nib that I was using was much finer, so it just did not put as much ink down. You don't put as much ink down, it doesn't take as long to dry. So I think that I kind of skewed that, so I'm going to call them pretty comparable. The water test was interesting. I feel like that's where it shows up more. I mean, just the general color, it might be kind of hard to see it on camera, actually. On my monitor, I can't distinguish the colors that differently, but I don't know how to look on the actual recording. But I can see the difference. If you held up one at a time in front of me, like 10 minutes from now, and said, is this Pilot Varsity Blue or Pilot Namiki Blue? I would say, I have no idea. But if you're holding them side by side, I can see a slight difference. The only difference that I was really able to tell was with the water test. So it's weird because it looks here like this actually ran a bit more, the color, but it has a darker baseline. So it's actually more permanent, but also less permanent at the same time. The Pilot Varsity Blue actually held up pretty well on the water side of things. So that's kind of cool to see. So, both have some degree of waterproofness to them. I would say the Pilot Namiki Blue has a stronger base, permanence to it. And then I used the fatter glass pen. This is the Rohrer and Klingner one, just to see if I put a lot more ink down, does it look more like this? And the answer is no. It just looks like a bolder version of the same blue ink. So that didn't make a difference. So, the nib size didn't change the darkness of the ink, which was good to at least know. So I do not believe that they are the exact same ink, which kind of makes sense, right? Especially because these Varsities, they're very interesting. You know, they have a nib, and I don't know if I think it's all attached, so I can't quite pull it out. But it doesn't have a conventional feed system in here. It's basically like a fibrous kind of wick that runs in the middle of this thing. You know, because it doesn't have to refill, so you don't have to have all the same guts and innards as you do on a regular feed. You can have the kind of feed like you would have on like a felt tip pen or something like that. It just goes to the nib. I wonder if I can slide the nib off. That's what I'm going to try. Give me a second. Marianne, were you the one that commented about me going off script here? Let me find that thing that I forgot about. Oh, I just dropped a converter on the floor. This is very compelling content, isn't it? Okay, I'm going to try to slide off this Varsity nib. I legitimately can't remember how easy this is to slide off. I may totally fail on doing this, but it seems like I should be able to slide it off without totally dismembering the pen. There we go. Okay, so it does slide off, sort of like a LAMY nib. And of course, the thing is completely inked. So how can you possibly see what's going on? I definitely thought that through. But if you look in here, if you can see, I don't know if you can see, okay. Right in the middle there, it's hard to tell because it's filled with ink, but that is like a fibrous wick kind of feed going right in there. So this little wick thing, that's what's delivering the ink, and that just stays nice and wet, and then it just puts all the ink on the back of this thing, and that's what allows it to write. Now, if you had a normal fountain pen, the challenge is if you're trying to change colors, that wick is maybe not going to hold up so well. Certainly you can't use like shimmering ink or any pigmented ink because it's going to clog that thing right up and it's not going to work anymore. But you'll be able to get a few fillings out of it before that wick sort of gives out on you. So it's meant to be disposable. It's not meant to be permanent, but I imagine that saves cost quite a bit in the manufacturing process, which is why they do it. So you can refill it. That is an option. Where was I getting at with all that? Is it the same ink? Oh, okay. So I would imagine that in order for the ink to kind of flow most ideally through that wick and not like dry out in the wick, they probably formulate the ink slightly differently than they do conventional fountain pen ink. That would be my guess without having my official I asked Pilot and heard back from them answer. Because frankly, I don't know. Pilot's pretty close to the vest when it comes to ink formulations and stuff like that. At best, I would probably get a yes or no answer on whether it's the same ink or not, which I've already done because the ink looks different enough to me where I can say it's not the same ink. But it's similar enough in performance, I would imagine. Pilot knows ink. They were doing ink long before I was a twinkle in my daddy's eye, as they would say. So they know what they're doing. They formulate ink for all different kinds of things because they don't just do fountain pens. They do ballpoints and they have the friction and they have all roller balls and all these different things. They know their ink, and printer ink, all that stuff. So it's not going to be exactly the same, but I would say if you want something pretty dang close, Pilot Namiki Blue is not a bad way to go in your regular fountain pen. Now, if I'd thought about it, I would have inked up a medium nib Prera. You know what? That's what I should do. Let me find, I'm going to improvise here, so I may have to edit this down a little bit. Let me find a Pilot pen with a medium nib that emulates your Prera. I'm going to ink it up with this ink and see if I think that it's similar enough. Give me a second.
6.5 hours later.
Okie dokie. Got myself a nice Houndstooth Metropolitan with a medium nib. So I'm just going to ink this sucker up. Oh, I don't have a converter in here. Darn it. Oh, y'all, I don't know. I don't know about all this. You would think after nearly 16 years, I would be more professional than this. You would think. Here we go. Pilot Blue. Give it a little squeezy squeeze. Ink it up. Beautiful. Just that simple. Okay. Now the question is, am I going to feel like this is similar to the Varsity in terms of how it feels? I'm going to go ahead and rip this off because y'all seen it. Ooh, I had the black one too. I didn't do the full shebang for the black ink because, frankly, I don't know that I would be able to tell much of a difference. So, and I ran out of time, so I didn't do it. But I did put both the Varsity Black and Takasumi. I'm pretty sure it's not Iroshizuku ink inside the Varsity, but that's the black ink that I had. There is a Namiki Black, which is probably more comparable. But the Iroshizuku, it flowed really nice. I will say the difference in flow on this pen between the Namiki Blue and the Iroshizuku was striking. This flowed so much smoother. So that might actually be what you want to do. You may want to use a medium nib and use some Iroshizuku ink. Like probably Azagao would be close. Azagao's pretty purple though. I don't know the blue that would be closest enough to Varsity Blue, but I think that I already inked this up. Okay. Let's see here. Pilot Varsity Blue. I'm just going to do this on the same page. Okay. This is medium. And then let's do a little swatch. I don't know why I'm doing a swatch because we've already done the color comparison. Okay. And then let's see here. Make sure it's nice and primed. Okay. Pilot. Yeah, it's not the same feel. The nib on the Metropolitan feels smoother, but it's not as broad. Does that make sense? So this is a medium. I'm willing to bet that if you had a broad steel nib, if that's even a thing, I don't know if Pilot has a lot of broad steel nibs. I should know this off the top of my head, but I know we don't have the Metropolitan in a broad. Do we? I guess I don't know. Wow, I'm on a roll. No, they have a stub. Okay. Yeah, I don't know that we have any Pilot steel broads, but if we do, let me know. That would be the thing that I think would be closer. Yeah, let's see. This is a good feeling medium nib, I will say. Yeah, I can see there the color definitely looks different between the two. That feels very smooth. I like that. But it's not as gushy as opposed to this. Yeah, this is toothier. And the nib itself is it's a little thinner, it's a little bouncier. So toothier yet bouncier and wetter. It's a weird thing, but yeah, I mean, even just looking at the tip size between the two, it's going to be hard to show you all, but the tip size between the two is noticeably different. Noticeably different. Let me see if I can actually zoom in and show you a little bit. These are both medium nibs, but they are not the same amount of tipping that's on these. You see that? Very different. So yeah, of course it's going to feel different because it's an entirely different nib. But I don't know. I love the Metropolitan feel. So I don't know what to tell your husband. If he really loves Varsities, refilling a Varsity with a different ink is going to be your best answer if you're trying to like be better for the environment or anything like that. Pilot or Namiki Blue would be a pretty decent substitute. I think that would work okay. But if you want a really wet flowing ink, throw some of the Iroshizuku in there. Put some Iroshizuku in a Varsity. Why not? Live it up. It's like throwing it's not quite, but it's like throwing a gold nib LAMY pen on a Safari, you know. Do it just because you can. All right, that was fun. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the prompt. I like that. All right, next up we have a question from Mixed Drinks 8100. In regards to Q&A last week, Mixed Drinks asked the question, I believe it's because, especially when I did the teaser on the short for YouTube, I talked about nib size. I did not clarify because it was short and I didn't have the time. But yes, I did talk about nib size can be confusing because it's like size of nib, number 4, 5, 6, whatever, versus nib grind size, extra fine, fine, medium, broad, whatever. So that's very confusing. Usually when people are talking about nib size, they're talking about the grind. So yeah, it was a little confusing. So I don't know, you didn't quite ask me to answer it in a way that's about the nib size, the nib grind, but I didn't have a lot. I had a lot of engagement and a lot of feedback, but I didn't have a lot of questions from last week's Q&A. So I turned your comment into a question. So you said, when you said nib size, I thought it was a question about extra fine, fine, medium, broad, italic, etc. That was your whole comment, but I turned it into a question. So since you thought that's what it was going to be about, I'm going to actually answer that for you this time. However, if you go back and watch what I had in episode 314, I kind of just pontificated and then gave my assumption about what I thought. I mean, I look at sales numbers and I know what we have here at Goulet Pens. I know what tends to be popular with us, but we are by no means the global fountain pen authority in terms of like knowing what people buy overall in the world. We're just one little retailer. So we have some perspective, more than just a random guess, but not by much. Not by much more than a random guess. Okay, so I'm also going to speculate answering this question. What is the most popular overall nib grind in the world? Well, it's definitely not going to be broad or wider. Broad, double broad, italic, those are not very popular. Even italics and stubs and stuff. You would think like, oh yeah, that's pretty popular. No, not really. Most people are not writing exclusively with stubs, People will have a couple in their collection, maybe. If you got 20 pens, you might have one or two stubs. Or one, or maybe, or none. But unless you're like all about some stubs, it's probably not going to be the mainstay of your collection. And that reflects kind of how they are. For us, nib size sales do tend to fluctuate a bit over time. It's very interesting. Sometimes it'll lean very heavy extra fine. Sometimes it'll be more towards fine. Recently, medium has been a bit more popular, but it's not been the most popular. It's just been like less unpopular. Broad is usually like very, very low, like 3 to 5% of sales. Yeah. And that's not just like overall, because not every pen has broad nibs. I'm talking like when we sell like a major pen that has all nib sizes available, broad at most will be like 5% of what everybody buys. So it's just not that popular, which is a shame because I love broad nibs, but most people don't. I think it's because it really depends on the paper that you use. If you use really ink-resistant paper with a decent margin on it, a decent line width, you can write away with a broad and it really shows off your ink well and it looks great. But for most people, if you're trying to write on like college ruling, like 7mm ruling or like a 5mm dot ruling, a broad nib is just way too much to deal with unless you're double spacing. Which, you may or may not want to do. So it's definitely not double broad, definitely not broad. Medium would be the only one that if it, again, I don't have an actual answer for this because I don't know the data, but I do know that if there's going to be like one nib size, like the Varsity, for example, the one nib size that's going to be offered on a pen globally, it tends to be a medium. So that would be the only thing that I would say maybe medium could be a contender, but I don't think it's actually the most popular. I think that's just what a lot of manufacturers offer, partly because I think medium nibs are very forgiving. I think especially for somebody that doesn't write with fountain pens every single day, a medium nib is going to be the safest bet. It's not so broad that you're like, you can't handle it. You can still write on your regular papers. You don't have to go with anything special. But it's not so fine that it's going to feel toothy or scratchy or anything like that. Scratchy in terms of what people might be used to. So manufacturers will get fewer complaints, basically, and have fewer issues of that. So I think medium is just a very safe nib option to ship out. And plus, in terms of like manufacturing, to smooth and polish a medium nib is easier than a fine nib. Certainly easier than an extra fine nib. The smaller you get, the less forgiving they are when you're polishing them, and the harder it is to work on. So medium nibs are pretty much the sweet spot. So that's the only thing where I think globally there could be an argument to be made for them being the most popular, partly because of that's what's available on a lot of pens. But I don't know. For us, fine nib, it's usually pretty much like neck and neck between fine and extra fine. But not all pens have extra fines. Usually, if you have a pen that has one thing, it's going to be a medium. If you have a second nib size, it's usually going to be a fine. A third nib size really depends. If it's a Japanese pen, it's probably going to be an extra fine. If it's a European pen, it's probably going to be a broad before an extra fine. So it kind of just depends on the manufacturer, depends where it's coming out of. If you're writing with longhand script, things like that, a broader nib is better. It's smoother, it puts down more ink, it allows you to write quickly. But any type of like Asian script that you're writing in, a finer nib is going to be better because there's more detail to have in most of those written languages. So the population is going to be greater in Asia, though. I don't know what India is like a wild card for me. I don't know what nib size is the most popular there. There's a lot of people in India, and there's a lot of people in China. So, and there's not going to be good data on what's available there. So I would say maybe extra fine okay. So my guess would be fine is probably the most popular. Extra fine could be a contender. Depends on what's going on in India and China, because there are just so many people there. And then medium would be maybe my third choice. That one would be a little bit more of a surprise, but not outside the realm of possibilities. I would bet just about anything on the fact that it's not broad or stub or flex or anything like that, because those are just so far distant outside of what's most popular in terms of what everybody wants. So yeah, that's what I think about that. To answer your question, I've now fulfilled your original intention on watching that. So I hope you see this one, Mixed Drinks. I hope you watch this one, and I hope my answer was satisfactory towards you. All right, let's get into the last question, shall we? This will be a fun one. All right, y'all ready for a deep dive? Because we're doing it anyway. All right, Pamela Snyder, 9745, says, in terms of materials used to make pen bodies, I received a Pilot Plumix in a box as a freebie. That's pretty cool. By far, the cheapest fountain pen I've ever had, akin to a Bic Crystal. However, since it's a Pilot, I'm pretty sure that it will write sufficiently. Well, Bic Crystal's a totally different pen. That is a ballpoint. Y'all have definitely seen a Bic Crystal. I think I have one here somewhere. I found one recently because I was like, I just need to have. Here we go. This is a Bic Crystal. We'll switch to the over. Oh, I don't have the overhead running. Whatever. That's not worth setting up. This is your typical Bic Crystal. These are disposable pens. There's like 1 billion of these thrown in the dumpster every year. I'm going to talk about why it maybe feels a little cheap, because it is a different type of plastic that's used for these. That's what we're talking about today. Plastic. Anyway, to finish your question, Pamela, what is the difference between plastic, acrylic, and precious resin? I know that pens can also be made from celluloid and acetate. Positives and negatives over one another. Do you have a blank that you can show from one of your collabs or limited editions? Well, I do have all these things. I guess I am going to use my overhead rig because I do have some materials to show. Let's go ahead and flip that on then. I'll show you the close-up of the Bic Crystal. Why not? Here we go. There's your Bic Crystal. So yeah, ballpoint pen. You've probably seen 1 million of these in your lifetime. Anyway, so there's that. I do have some materials I can show you. Let's get into that in a minute because I want to talk your ear off about materials first, and then I'll reward you with visual stunningness. All right. You asked a bunch of stuff. I'm going to answer a bunch of stuff. It gets real confusing real fast. I will say that. Depends if you want to talk scientific terms or if you want to talk marketing terms in terms of what's the difference between plastic, acrylic, and resin. So plastic is going to be, I'm mostly going to speak about the scientific because marketing is goofy and you can call anything and you can justify it. Plastic is going to be your broader category of materials. It's going to be a synthetic or a semi-synthetic polymer, and specific properties are going to vary wildly depending on the composition of said polymers. All resins are plastic, but not all plastics are going to be the same. All acrylic is a type of plastic, but not all plastics are acrylic, right? So I'm going to get more into it here. So acrylic itself is a type of plastic derived from PMMA, which is polymethyl methacrylate. Told you we're getting scientific. It is what you would typically associate with plastic, like a bit like this. This is technically polystyrene, which is more brittle. It's cheaper. It's basically good for mass production, but it doesn't look amazing. It scratches easily. It cracks easily, but they're cheap, so they can make a ton of them. PMMA is basically that's more or less the precious resin, right? Mont Blanc, I think, coined the term precious resin. I don't know if it's trademarked for them, but they certainly moved forward heavily with that term. I believe it's maybe their own proprietary blend of PMMA, but a lot of your higher end injection molded resins are going to be PMMA. It's got some different properties to it. So again, I don't think all acrylic, or I think all acrylic might be part of PMMA. I don't know that all PMMA is considered acrylic. I did not dive that deep in. I guess I dived, but I didn't touch the bottom of the pool. If we're diving in a pool, I'm going to say we're diving in a pool. So this acrylic PMMA stuff, this is going to look nicer. It's going to have more depth and color. You can do, swirly stuff. You can do really interesting things with it. It's going to be a little bit more brittle than polystyrene, but a little bit more brittle than some of the other plastics like ABS and stuff like that, that you might typically see, like a LAMY Safari. Like that's made of ABS plastic. It's going to be very durable and very impact resistant, but it's not going to look the same depth and the same interesting, kind of color as you can get with some of these like precious materials, right? These PMMAs. I mentioned precious resin. Yep, that's basically a buzzword. It's a marketing thing. Plastic versus resin. So this is something I learned recently from, I don't remember the individual's name, but it was pointed out to me in a comment on a video about technically resin is like the precursor to plastic, basically. So they're closely related. Resin is more accurately the raw or semi-processed liquid or malleable substance used in plastic manufacturing. But it's also used as a marketing term, which is also extremely common in the pen world, because most people, when they think plastic, they think cheap, they think breakable, they think disposable. They're not thinking high-end, going to last a really long time kind of a thing. So resin, I think, is just like, not just in the pen world, but in a lot of different places, resin is used as the sort of fancier term for nice plastic, which is mostly PMMA. But yeah, could mean a bunch of different things, but again, it's marketing, so it's goofy and you can make up whatever you want. So yeah, let's see here. Yep. I am working on a video that I'm putting together about these different materials. It's taking me a while, so I'm not going to promise it anytime soon. It's also not the most fun video to prep, and I have no idea how I'm going to make it interesting visually. So consider this like I'm telling you a lot of the information that might be in that video, but it's not as concise and prepared. So my list of plastics that I have so far that I know are used in the pen world, we have PMMA, polymethyl methacrylate, ABS, which is acrylonitrile butadiene styrene. That rolls off the tongue. That's why everybody calls it ABS. There's cellulose butyrate, which is like Noodler's pens. They're really great smelling stuff. It's also what like old like screwdriver handles are made out of. Like if you have your grandfather's like old screwdriver handles, they stink like death. Smells like Noodler's pens. Celluloid, which is nitrocellulose. There's cellulose acetate. There's acrylic acetate. There is polycarbonate, polystyrene, polypropylene, polyethylene. There is volcanic resin, Homo sapiens, which is some kind of resin with stuff embedded in it, volcanic rock embedded in it. There's epoxy resin, polyester resin, and probably more. Those are just the ones that I've named so far. Yeah, it's a lot. There's a lot of different ones. So I'll stop there. You see how complicated this can get. More or less, though, what it comes down to with pens is, one is cost. One is different plastics can be manufactured into a pen form in different ways. So, for example, you have an ABS plastic or a polystyrene or, like a cellulose butyrate and PMMA. Those can all be injection molded, which is way faster than machining them. It's more of an investment. It's more expensive to do that. So, you either need to make a whole lot of very inexpensive pens and sell a ton of them, so that you can spread the cost out because the molds that you use for injection molding machine can cost a lot of money. It can cost between like $10,000 and $100,000. Depends on the complexity of the mold and the precision needed and stuff like that. They can get really, really expensive. So it's a big investment, and you got to really get it right. And they last a pretty long time once you do them, but it's a big investment. So yes, the per pen cost of manufacturing for injection molding is way cheaper, but to get set up and to make the mold is very expensive. So that's why not every pen is made out of that. Usually when you have like higher end small batch stuff that's machined, you're going to use a cast resin, a cast plastic, something like a cellulose acetate, acrylic acetate, polycarbonate would fall into this category too. I believe. I don't know if you can injection mold polycarbonate actually. I need to do more research on that one. Don't hold me to that. Certainly the volcanic resin, epoxy resin, polyester resin, those are not really easily injection moldable. They take time to cure, which is cool. You can do a lot of different effects. That's how you get pens with swirly materials and stuff. This is where I'll break out the materials and you'll get the payoff of the overhead camera. So yes, if you want materials that have stuff in it, you can't do this with injection molding. You have to cast it in there, So you can do that. If you want any type of quartz-looking material, there's the little bits of resin that are in there that are cast into a second material. That's how you get that effect. Swirly stuff like this, you can't really do that with injection molding. Not so easily. So if you want things with like depth to it and little swirls like that, that's got to be done with a cast resin. So these are all examples of cast resins. Now, cast resins, they're a little bit more expensive for the material. They take a lot more time to produce. And because each part has to be individually machined and they can't just be like cranked out in injection molding, it means that they're more expensive per piece to produce. So that's why it's very difficult to get pens with really nice materials like this at a price that you would have something like a Platinum Preppy or even a LAMY Safari, because just the material production and then the method of manufacturing is going to be much more expensive. However, it's more expensive per piece, but if you're making them in smaller batches and you don't have to, pay back a $100,000 mold, this actually might be the most economical thing. So this is why you see a lot of independent pen makers, the Edisons, Franklin Christophs, folks like that. They're going to have cast resins, basically, because it makes more sense, especially if you want color variety, if you want really interesting looking materials. That's the preferred thing. Still, you get good impact resistance with these types of materials. I believe these are all going to be like acrylic acetate or something close to it. These are going to be pretty impact resistant. They polish nicely. They are pretty scratch resistant. You can still scratch them, but they're not as easily scratched as like a polystyrene would be, like this. So they're like really good all around. So PMMA and acrylic acetate are really good for pens. They're some of the more common ones. Your LAMY Safaris, those are going to be your ABS type plastic. And there's probably others. I literally don't have a Safari at hand that I can show you right now, but y'all know what a Safari looks like, chances are. So yes, that is what's going on there. You asked about seeing different rods. So I don't have a lot of raw rods. I don't actually have a raw rod form of like a pen that we are currently carrying now. We're not the manufacturer, so I'm not often getting the raw rods. And partly I'll show you why, because like I have a couple of raw rods right here, and it's hard to tell what's going on. So this is a cast resin for sure. I believe this is like an epoxy type resin. Because in order to get these like really intense swirls like this, I think it's easier to do that with an epoxy or a polyester resin. Polyester resin is more brittle, so it's not as popular. Epoxy resin is typically what's being used with a lot of independent, like, you know, people who make materials, pen maker, you know, type. What do you call it? Pen material makers. You know, like the independent folks who are, you know, like, well, I'm not going to name specifically because if they don't use epoxy resin, I don't want to say that they are, but I believe that's what they're using, is mostly epoxy resin. Anyway, so you can mix it in a whole bunch of different colors. You mix it in tiny little batches, and then you let them set up a little bit, and then you pour them into each other to get a swirly effect. And that's how you get these crazy swirls. You can't do that with an injection molding, really. All you can do in an injection molding with multiple colors is, you know, like the Visconti, Mirage, Mythos, and like those types of pens, the Rembrandts, Van Goghs, those are injection molding. So you can get like a smear of color, but you can't get like a swirl with depth to it like that in injection molding. It's just not very feasible. So anyway, you see these like blocks that I have that are, you know, they're cast into a sheet and then they're cut down into whatever size that's needed for manufacturing. Typically when you're an independent maker and you're just trying to minimize how much material you use because it is expensive, and you're hand machining every single one, you get like these little blocks like this. But if you're a step up from just basically turning them by hand on a lathe, or maybe like just a simple metal lathe type thing where it's like you're essentially hand cranking, you know, hand turning. You may not be turning it like with a turning tool just like this, but you might be like have little wheels that have cutters that go in. But if you're having to manually do that, there's no CNC automation going on. You know, you can use this type of material, and this stuff is easy to manufacture in bulk and doesn't require a lot of processing. So this works really well for independent pen makers, you know, people who sell stuff at craft shows and art fairs and, you know, Etsy and stuff like that. This is what I was starting out with back in the day when I was making pens. I was always buying these in what are called blanks. So you get like 5 or 6 inch blanks. That's all the material you need for a given pen. You know, you turn it down in your lathe, you drill a hole in it, you glue in whatever parts you need, and eventually you have a pen, right? Most of these other pens, though, they're not dealing with short blanks like this. You know, if you want to have a pen like Monograppa and Delta, they're not turning these things most likely one at a time like this. They're probably buying rods that are like several feet long, 2 or 3 feet long. There's certain standards for some of these things, but basically there's CNC machining equipment that's made for a round rod of a given size that you feed into the machine, and then it like auto feeds. So it's pretty cool. I don't have anything visually to show you because I don't have any of this equipment myself, but it's pretty cool. You may have seen, I don't know, have I ever done any video of that process being made? I don't know that I really have. But I don't know, maybe Edison Pens has done that because they have some CNC equipment that might show some of that. But anyway, so you get these rods that are several feet long, and the machine itself will like auto feed out part of the rod. It'll spin down, cut it to whatever, piece drops off, and then it just auto feeds more rod out. It makes it so that in between every part of the pen, you're not having to change out stuff. It just saves a ton of time. So that's typically how cast resin materials are used. So you might start out with something like this, where it's just a sheet, or that's like cut up into slots like this. But typically how manufacturers who are doing any kind of scale are going to want them is going to be in round rods like this. So you might buy this in like a 3 foot long piece, and that's going to be what you feed into the machine. It's not going to be all nice and polished up like this. This is a sample that was done up for us, but so that's like the raw manufacturing part. You can see how difficult this is to see, like, what is that actually going to look like when it's on a pen? So you have to really know your materials well to envision how this is going to look. But even still, even as much experience as I had making pens coming into this business, and I've seen a lot of pens, a lot of materials, a lot of factories and ways they manufacture, I would not be able to look at, I could tell you what color that this thing is going to end up being, but I would not be able to tell you very easily how translucent it's going to be. I wouldn't be able to tell you what's the dominant color going to look like when it's actually turned down into a pen. I could guess, but a lot of times it looks pretty different by the time you make it small and round. And if it's a very dense, dark material, it's going to look really different depending on how thick the piece ends up being too. So I try to bring some things. I don't have parts of everything, but at least had some. So, here's a sample of the, this is the Delta Spaccanopoli Chilegia that we have as an exclusive. So this is just the raw rod right here. It's not hyper translucent. So when it turned down into the final pen, it looks pretty accurate to what the sample was. And we know the materials pretty well. We know that with this type of resin, it's going to be pretty easy to tell what it's going to look like in its final form. But I mean, even right here, just the translucence that you can see on the cap, that makes the color look different. It makes it look like a lighter red. That's what's so tricky about materials, is sometimes you mix these materials up and you turn it down into a pen and you have no idea what it's going to actually turn out into until you make up a sample of it. So usually for us, a lot of the times the process for turning materials into pens is we get a sample of the material. And if we like that, we might have several different samples and we're like, ooh, we like this. We think it's going to turn out well. Let's make a sample pen, actually make a final thing. Then we know, okay, this is what it's actually going to look like. So usually you'll have steps, where you'll get the materials, you'll look at it, you'll narrow down, and then you'll drill down and get it to more of its final form before you're actually, mass producing any type of pen. This is another one. This is another Delta. This one ended up looking pretty similar. This was a Conklin Durograph that we did. So this material, when they did the sample for us, they actually drilled out the inside of it so that we could tell, because it was a little more translucent. We wanted to get a sample of closer to what it's going to look like. So they did this sample for us, and it ended up being a pretty close representation to the final pen. This one I showed, this is a stipula that we did a while ago, the Ventidu. This is a copper flake. So this material looks really cool like this. Copper is very dense, but by the time you make it thinner and you turn it down into, pen form, the density of that copper looks totally different, right? And we knew that. We knew that because we know, kind of what we're looking at. But this is why you can't purely base it off of what you're looking at in a sample and what it's going to look like in a final pen. Especially here, even the cap here, the material's thicker, so it has more of the flake in there. Whereas down here at the bottom, it's not as thick, so you have less flake. That's just how it goes sometimes. So that also can, sway what material you want to use on what pen, knowing how thick how thick the material on a pen is can make a big difference. And then this is a monograppa one that we had. So this was kind of cool. When they turned the sample, they left the solid part on the end, and they turned part of it so that we could see the lighter purple part, because that's what's going to end up looking like, in the middle of the pen. The ends are going to be more solid, but then the middle of the pen, the material is going to be thinner and we'll have a lighter color. So that was helpful there. But the final thing ended up looking pretty close to what the sample was. So anyway, that's sort of what that process is like. It's a whole different world when you're looking at materials of pens and stuff like that. It's really fun. And Rachel's the color whisperer, and I know more about the manufacturing side of it. So we work together as a pair, and our team, is knowledgeable too. It's not just us in a vacuum, but, we're particularly passionate about these things, and that's why we've made just so many exclusives over the years, is because we really love the process and we love making them for you. So there you go. Nice deep dive, pretty thorough deep dive, right? Maybe needed a snorkel, not a scuba suit. We stayed under there. But anyway, I had fun with that. Thanks for asking that question. I'm going to skip the spotlight for this week because, frankly, I got to go home and have dinner with my family. But we'll cover a little bit of my adventures, and I got a fun fact for you at the end. So let's talk about my adventures. I just looked at the timestamp, and I talked for 20 minutes about pen materials. Clearly, I need to finally go and actually make that whole video. And I need to make it more concise than what I just did, but whatever. Y'all know what you're getting into when you come here. Okay, my adventures. Let's see here. Fairly low key. Been doing a lot of stuff around the house. Kids are off school. They're coming, helping at the office a little bit here. You know, putting some syringes together and stuff like that. So we're keeping them pretty busy. But they're motivated. They want to earn money and they want to do stuff. So they're mowing the lawn. They're doing, you know, house chores and all that good stuff. Yeah, we don't have an allowance for our kids. We just pay them to do stuff around the house. We don't pay them for anything of like their own stuff. But we pay them for things that like help the family. So yeah, we do that. So that's pretty cool. My son, bless his heart, you know, he's motivated. He wants to earn some money. There's like some, I don't know, Gundam stuff he wants to save up for kind of perpetually. He's a bit obsessed. But he really wants to earn money and he's got time in the summer. So he wants to do it. So he was motivated. So, you know, I needed to go to the dump because we live rural. We don't have a trash pickup. And I knew this one, we had like some lead acid batteries we needed to change out of some of the equipment that we have at the office here. I had other random stuff. I had some motor oil. I had, you know, the plastics and all the normal things. I'd like, you know, we have recycling at our like transfer station that we have to stop. So there were like 7 different places within the facility I had to stop. So it was just like a very time consuming one. And it's getting hotter. And there's these friggin' animals that keep getting in our trash cans. And, you know, then they pick away at the trash bags and then the bags open up and then flies get in there and other creatures. So it's just, our cans were just nasty. So I was like, Joseph, it's not going to be an easy one. You know, this is not going to be fun. So I had to give him a little extra financial motivation, but he hung with me. It was not the cleanest, easiest dump trip. And then when we got back, the cans were disgusting. So we had to like wash them out, bleach them and everything. This is what happens when it gets hot. I need to go to the dump more often is what it is. I can't leave the cans sitting out there in the sun. It just gets gross. You know, and he was just like, and then he was mowing the lawn after that. And I was like, he's not one to want to be outside or get dirty at all. But when he wants something, it's happening. So that was fun just to see him, you know, doing some stuff. Cause I just remember doing a lot of stuff like that with my dad. I was not initially motivated to do it, but once I got into it, I was like, yeah, this isn't so bad. And it's like, you know, I kept telling him like, this is the stuff, you know, cause this weekend was Father's Day too. This was on Saturday that I was doing this. So the day before Father's Day, but I was like, yeah, Joseph, I was like, this is part of what I do as the dad in the family is like, I do these like physical jobs that nobody else wants to do. Like it's too gross. It's too whatever. It's like, these are the things that I end up doing. And, you know, he's just a teenager. He's just, this kind of stuff just kind of happens. And so he just like was really thinking, I was like, oh yeah, this is kind of gross. And it's like, yeah, I've been doing this, you know, we lived in our house for a long time, over a decade. And it's like, I've been doing this, you know, every week or two for that long. And he's like, yeah, wow. So it really stuck with him. So for Father's Day, the next day, he made me a card. It was very sweet. Not a fanciest card, but it was just a very thoughtful card about like, he just wrote out like all the just terrible crap that I do that nobody else in the family wants to do, you know? And it's, you know, he mentioned like going out and setting up the generator in the rain and, you know, stuff I didn't even have to do that much, but, you know, just all the random things, you know, taking the trash out, doing all that stuff, you know, killing whatever, you know, spraying wasp nests that come about. And it's like, he recognized and appreciated. So that was really cool. Not a fancy gift. I don't need a lot of stuff, but, you know, having my son acknowledge specific things that are just absolutely thankless around the home, that meant a lot to me. And then Ellie made me this really sweet, like digital, you know, artwork with a compilation. It was like a collage of different pictures of me and her and different members of the family with different activities and stuff. And she put it all together. It was really, really sweet as well. So I don't know. That meant more to me than anything my kids could have bought. It was, you know, making stuff and saying nice words. So that was really cool. So didn't do a whole ton of stuff for Father's Day, but that was very sweet coming from them. And then just kept it pretty low key. Had dinner with my parents, you know, got to see my dad. So that was cool. My project at the moment, I'm currently working on, you know, Rachel plays piano, and currently the stand that she has for her keyboard is like, you know, it's like a typical music stand that can hold like 2 pages, but sometimes she has like 3 or 4 pages that she wants to be able to play, you know, and there's like, just weird like page turns and stuff like that it's not as enjoyable. So I did two things. One is I had this like thick foam core stuff that I cut and taped up as kind of just like a quick and easy thing that you can throw on an existing music stand to be able to just basically extend it. So it's like a 4-page, like 32-inch, music stand thing that you put on there. So it's like an L shape, and you can throw it on the music stand. It's nice and light for when she does want to have that. But it looks not the nicest. It's okay. It's all black, so it looks okay. But I wanted something that looks a little nicer for her, so I'm actually making a wider stand that will actually like fit into the holes on the keyboard that are going to be made out of cherry. So I've been working on that, getting that all situated. So that'll be fun. It's my little woodworking project at the moment. And then I've just been drumming a lot. I did a lot of drumming for Father's Day. Yep, still banging on the drums like a fool and having a good time. I'm really getting the hang of it. It's at the point now where I can listen to a lot of different like new songs, not like the most complex stuff, but like your typical rock song that's got a pretty steady beat. And I can pick it up pretty quick just by ear, because that's what I've been doing this whole time, is playing a lot by ear. So that feels pretty cool to just like, be able to hear a song and start playing along with it. So just like jamming along with it, I'm like, oh, this is a lot of fun. So I've been playing a lot of the same stuff over and over again. And then, I was feeling nostalgic a little bit. Like Rachel had mentioned some like older songs that we knew, because we've been together for like 23 years. So we were thinking about like some of the songs that we listened to in college together and stuff like that, because I was talking about different beats and, breaking down some different ones. And she was like, oh, that one kind of sounds like such and such from back in the day. So we were pulling up old, Hoobastank and, older stuff like that, old Creed and, things like that. And I was kind of jamming along with that a little bit. And that was a lot of fun. Plus, one of our favorite bands, we love Alter Bridge, and we love Mark Tremonti, his band Tremonti. But his stuff is like, it's more like speed metal, which is like very aggressive drumming, double bass pedal and stuff like that, which has been like absolutely unattainable for me to this point. But I'm not going to say that I can play it, but I can keep with the beat. But I do have a double bass pedal, and I was able to at least fake trying to play double bass. But I don't know. It's like I bought the double bass pedal and I was like, oh, this is hard. So I haven't really practiced that very much. But I don't know, something clicked as I was playing on Sunday. I was playing a lot for like several hours. And it was like, oh, something's clicking. Like this is kind of making sense a little bit. So I think I might practice up on the double bass pedal a little bit now. Because I love playing all styles of music. I love gospel chops, and I love, all kinds of stuff. Not the biggest fan on like country western type stuff, like train grooves and stuff. They're okay. They're not my favorite. But I really love rock and speed metal and stuff like that. It's very fun. I love aggressive drumming. I'm a big guy. I can drum aggressively. Anyway, that's it. I've talked enough about drumming. I satisfied the drummers out there, and the rest of you that are bored. Y'all probably didn't make it through the pen material one, so I think I'm good. I want to thank you for watching, sticking with me on this Q&A. It ended up not being much shorter than a regular one, so how about that? I can really talk, can't I? My question, or my fun fact, my prompt question of the week, not a question of the week, it's my fun fact. So I was thinking about plastics, and I was like, how many types of plastic are there? And when did plastic come about? I just said a little teensy little bit of plastic history. So the first historically recognized plastic was called Parkesine. This was developed in 1856 by the British inventor Alexander Parkes. Parkesine Parkes. So it was a cellulose nitrite. So celluloid, basically. It might be slightly different. I think nitrocellulose might be slightly different from cellulose nitrite. I think I looked that up before. There's slight variants, but either way, not that different. But it's made from plant fibers. So it's natural cellulose treated with nitric acid and alcohol. It was like a semi-synthetic plastic. So the only problem is it was flammable. But it was exhibited at the 1862 Great International Exhibition in London as a substitute for ivory and tortoiseshell. And I believe some of the earliest uses they had for those was for like snookers and billiard balls back in the day. The only problem with that is sometimes they could explode or burst into flames upon contact. So that didn't last long. They came up with different materials. I believe billiard balls are made out of PMMA these days, if I'm not mistaken. But how many plastics are there? So many. There's like 45 to 50 common like base plastic types like PMMA and polystyrene and, cellulose butyrate and all that kind of stuff. But it's thousands or likely tens of thousands of commercial formulations, like proprietary formulations that are used for all different kinds of things, depending on your strength, flexibility, appearance, temperature resistance, all that type of stuff. Brittleness. You can pretty much get it to do whatever you want. And plastics are just a part of us because we're all eating microplastics with all of our fish, right? But it's a part of our world, for better or for worse. Wow, sorry to end on a downer. Anyway, thanks for sticking with me. Had a good time with y'all. I'll be around for next week. And then I will be off the week of 4th of July. Taking a little time off from Q&A. So, yeah, that'll be happening, I guess. Is that several weeks from now? I don't know. I record these days before they actually publish, but I believe that's going to be the case. So either way, I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching, and right on.